Welcome, and this is Shelf Life, the second episode, and my god, I have one of the nerdiest books to tell you guys about today. Like, this one, I even thought, should I share this? Is this a little too deep into I'm Brian, by the way, who I am as a person and the stuff that I will read and how weird and into the weeds it can get? But I'm doing it. Here we go. This is a long one. It's The First Presidential Contest, subtitle 1796 and the Founding of American Democracy. This is written by, I don't know how to say his last name, it's either Jeffrey L. Paisley or Pasley. Sorry guy, don't know how to say your name. That's one of the downfalls of a reading medium versus an audio one. This was put out in 2013, so it's still a relatively recent book. About 500 pages, which is, meaty, but not long, I wouldn't say. I've certainly read longer books than that. And it's available in hardcover, paperback, and audiobook formats as far as I can tell. This is actually one of a series of 24 books. The series is called American Presidential Elections, and it's put out by the publisher University Press of Kansas, which I do believe is in fact a press body of the University of Kansas and possibly other parts of the State Institute for schooling in the state of Kansas. Anyway, this is exactly what it is about in the title. It's not like the previous episode of The Hot Zone where you're wondering what's hot, what does hot mean, where's the zone, everything like that. This one is literally about the first presidential contest, which is the right context to put this in. This is not about so much George Washington. This is actually about then Vice President John Adams and then former Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson. I almost forgot his name. That's really bad. Anyway, this book is just about essentially day by day, but it's not arranged in a day by day format. This is essentially about how this first contest for who's going to be president of the United States came about. Everybody knew Washington was going to step down after his second term, and there were these two different ideologies at the time, which you might say, oh, that sounds like today, but it's worth mentioning these ideologies do not line up with the Republican Party and Democratic Party of today. When you read about the things they're fighting about, you realize how mishmashed they are compared to where we're at today, which also just goes to show over time how much these parties have changed. So the parties back then is you had the Federalists, which George Washington was essentially a part of, if not necessarily properly considered a party member, and then the Democratic Republicans. So John Adams, Federalist, versus Thomas Jefferson, Democratic Republican. And also kind of what makes this so confusing is the Democratic Republicans would also call themselves Republicans. They would also call themselves Democrats. They'll also call themselves Anti-Federalists, and because they just needed more names, they would also call themselves Jeffersonians. You get all of that here. And it's just how this contest was fought between these two people, because this was the first time it felt like there was really going to be a choice. There wasn't a choice when it came to Washington. Everybody pretty much agreed. There wasn't a whole lot to argue over. That was going to be the first president of the United States. But we did have questions about who was going to be the second when that time came. I will say that this book can be tedious at times, but this was one of those tedious things that didn't stop me from reading. Sometimes you're just like, I need a break, put the book down, walk away. This one did something else to me. It was kind of a half measure. I would continue to read, but sometimes I wasn't absorbing what I was reading. Why did I continue reading? It's because this book is quite easily one of the most well-researched books I'd ever come across. They are constantly quoting from records of newspapers that existed back in the day. letters that were being sent to each other, and all of this material that they were working off of. It's really insane, and that's really specifically why I called this one of the nerdiest books I've ever read. This is just information being thrown at you. It's real, it's raw, it's what was the case, and yet there's so much of it. So this can definitely overload some brains. I was certainly overloaded, although I'm imagining most people are smarter than me and probably would do better. It was also fascinating just to see how individualistic each state was back then and how they had to handle things differently. There were plenty of times when I felt like I was reading those pages that were being solicited out to everybody throughout those states, and it really changed my view of politics, which is maybe a bit of a caution here. I think I don't like the political way of life that we experience here in the 21st century. This may make you sad if you read this book, because it turns out it kind of was always that way in the United States, even with this first true election, contested election. In fact, I didn't read this until after the coronavirus pandemic had happened, and it was shocking the number of things that line up with the 2020 election here in the United States. That said, we are talking about politics as well, so you gotta worry, and it's something that I'm constantly trying to be cautious of when I read books like this. Is this person handling these sides fairly? Do they have a bias? Is it coming through? Can I catch it? And I did see some people complain that they did feel like he leaned more positive towards the Democratic Republican side of this battle. But to be honest with you, when I read those complaints, I was sort of surprised. Not because I thought the opposite was true, it's because I really didn't think he sided either way. Part of that tedium is that he was just delivering the information, at least how I take it. I think one of the most fun experiences I had reading this book was thinking about the fights about media and news delivery today. We have a lot of people who say, oh, don't watch this channel or don't read that paper. They're biased, they're partisan, they're just another arm of so-and-so or such and such party. And again, that was true back then, although back then in 1796, it wasn't just blatantly true, it was the point. When you learn why some of these papers were created back then, and what their purpose was, their mission was, and how they were used by party members of influence, you kind of look at what we have and say, it's not great, we're not perfect, but we are better. So that's one thing this book actually made me feel a little bit better about. Of course, times can change, and maybe I come back to this later on and go, oh, today's worse than I realized. But anyway, this was a good book. I definitely don't think it's for everybody, but because I liked it so much, I was like, I gotta share. It's gotta be one of the ones that I put on shelf life. So there you have it. Read at your own risk. I would say if you're interested in the subject material, don't do what I do. I just buy the book before reading it. I would say see if you can find this in a library or catch snippets of it maybe available for preview online before you buy it. It worked out for me. I don't think this book is going to work out for everybody. As for the other 23 books in this series, there are a few that I plan on getting. I actually already have another one in this book series, but I'm not planning on getting all of the books in this series and then reading them, all of them, and making all of them a part of shelf life. I just wanted to let you know, it's definitely that would be something that I don't think even I could do. But this was a great first start, and I do feel like when it comes to who we describe as the founding fathers of this country, that once the political game was in, I have a much different view of all of them while at the same time coming away feeling like I have a better understanding. Thanks for listening to me just rattle on about a book that I'm sure most of you are gonna not want to read. But if you've read something like this, and you thought it was a good way to cover 1796 or that period in American life, hey, go ahead and share it. You know, myself and others would be more than happy to check it out. And if you read this and you hated it and you think I'm absolutely wrong, lay into me. I'm losing my voice. So thanks a lot for joining us, guys. Bye.